Edward Staten remembers seeing the battered citizens of Nagasaki.
And they were pushing little two-wheel, bicycle wheel carts around. Men, women, and children, everybody were doing that. And they were cleaning up all the fragments of human parts.
He remembers the bonfires dotting the city's remains.
I thought, oh, they're just burning trash. When I got out there, I found out they were burning their relatives' remains. And the sky was full of vultures.
He remembers the buildings without roofs.
They were lined with injured people who were dying of radioactive burns. And they were being covered with a burlap sack for lack of adequate medical supplies. And the doctors went in and lifted that burlap up, and people's flesh would come off with the burlap. And they had to put the burlap back and say there's nothing they can do for them. They're dying. That's all there was to it.
He remembers the stunned look on the faces of Japanese civilians, even though it was 3 weeks since the bomb had been dropped there.
Expressions of shock and horror on their faces still. These are the people who did this to us. How could it happen? You know, kind of an attitude.
They understood it was one bomb that...
Yeah.
Most of all, Edward Staten remembers the corpses of the innocent ones, the little bodies still unburied.
Small children who had absolutely no culpability for what had happened. The harbor was full of their corpses floating out to sea. And, you know, why did they have to bear the recompense for what their adults had done at Pearl Harbor? And this is why we did it. I'm sure that we remembered Pearl Harbor when we hit Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And we had to end the war. There's no question about that. The war had to be ended, and we were somewhat backed into a corner where once we started a war, we had to finish it.
Staten says the lesson is that war is not a viable option anymore. For 40 years, he was torn by the need to end the war by using the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the indiscriminate death it rained on the city and its children. So in 1985, Ed Staten wrote a poem, Nagasaki's Child, to a dead 3-year-old then and the living children now.
Which went like this: Nagasaki's little child, your years were less than 3 when we expunged the rest away to seal our victory. I'd longed to see you smile and laugh, but 'twas too late for such. The war I'd found was far too cruel for me to hope that much. I'd not forget your lifeless form the long years since that day, until the wrong could be made right. Can you forgive, I'd pray? I'd hold the hope that where you are, you'd understand my sense and somehow come to let me know you'd heard my suppliance. Nagasaki's little child of 1989, the airport overcrowded seemed, but there you were in line with family to board your plane, when suddenly you ran to where I sat amongst the crowd as if you had a plan. You stopped and smiled to me and laughed. Then you were on your flight to your abode, a better place, since you'd be there aright. Because of you, dear child of 3, God's mercy came that day to soothe my spirit, trouble sore, and bear my grief away.